try that. Okay, I think that's you.
Yeah, and it's
No,
recording.
you haven't given me screen sharing. You are the host now. Let's see what I can do now.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all this. God, I've got 3 million desktops. Right, let's try this one. Right,
Yep.
hopefully you can all see this.
Yep. Question
Yep.
mark.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, just need to get this full screen. There. Right. Okay, everybody got that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start with a question. That's the reason for the question mark. It's sort of rhetorical. What interested you about amateur radio? What was so good that you studied for exams for a hobby? And what for some of you inspired you enough to put yourself through the 5 minutes of terror that was the Morse test? At least it was for me.
Yeah.
On my part, I've been interested in radio since being a boy. I knew nothing about amateur radio and I wasn't a shortwave listener. But to me, it was just exciting. I can remember walking past the electrical shop on Kenyon Lane in Moston, where I lived as a boy, and looking longingly at a pair of walkie-talkies in the window. I've no idea what frequency they used or what they were, really. I just wanted to know. I just wanted to be like my space heroes that could pick up a handheld and talk across the cosmos. Come the middle of the 70s, I got into Citizens Band. This was during a fabulous sunspot cycle that I knew nothing about then. And I could hear New York cabbies talking to each other on AM while I was driving around Morecambe. And from here, I started hearing about amateur radio and meeting people who'd become radio amateurs during the CB boom. I met my wife, Linda, on FMCB. And although I was in the middle of an RAE course, I dropped out. Years later, I got back into it, and so did Linda. It was all very exciting. There was lots to experiment with and learn. And from chatting on the local repeater as I traveled around for work, to VHF SSB, packet radio, and all sorts of fun things. Then I passed my Morse test and the world of HF opened. Slow scan television, RTTY, all the other modes. I've had a play with just about all of them. Construction, experimenting with aerials, portable radio, contesting and de-expeditions. Some great things. And for me, experimentation is my interest. In Ireland, they're known as radio experimenters, and I would love to be called that. I kept operating on VHF and UHF, and soon IRLP and Echolink came along. This allowed me to actually talk with stations from further afield, which added to the interest initially, but I found I preferred to use HF for my DX contacts at that stage. Still, FM was great when mobile. Being able to use a repeater from the car improved my range and meant I could chat back home even from around the other side of Morecambe Bay. It still suffered from range, though. As you got further away, the audio would start to get hissy and crackly. Imagine then my interest when I discovered digital voice. Still using FM, but transmitting a digital stream between the radios. And what this meant was the audio was either on or off. There were no hisses, no crackles, and an extended range as it could decode virtually perfectly down to S0. A better simplex and better using a repeater. So let's have a closer look. What exactly is digital voice? Well, we're used to analog voice, of course, whether it be AM, FM, or SSB. So what's the difference with digital voice? Well, it starts in the same way. You talk into a microphone. Small technical hitch here. Sorry about that. For FM, your signals from the microphone are are basically converted into RF and sent over the air to be received at the other end. Sorry, I'm having to look at a few things here because people are joining. For digital voice, it starts in exactly the same way. But your analog voice is converted into a digital stream, which is then transmitted using FM by the radio and received by the remote radio and converted back to analog. Now, that's the only difference. There is no other difference at all. The bit between the two radios is digital. In the real world, this means that when the digital stream is received by the remote radio, it's received perfectly or not at all. It will be received perfectly, as I've already said, almost down to S0. And it's not affected anywhere near as badly by mobile flutter or poor signal crackles. I think the thing that confuses most people coming into digital voice for the first time are the amount of different offerings. The obvious ones are Fusion, DMR, and D-Star. But there are others like NXDN and M17 too. And different manufacturers have their own digital voice offering. Fusion is Yaesu's offering. DMR is Motorola, Anytone, Hytera, and lots of others. D-Star is ICOM. NXDN tends to be Kenwood. And M17 is a new open source project by radio amateurs for radio amateurs. The only problem with M17 currently is the lack of hardware. So I'm going to talk about system fusion. The mode that Fusion uses is called C4FM, and this stands for Constant Envelope 4-Level Frequency Modulation. I've no idea either. Fusion is the easiest of the digital voice modes to understand and use. You don't have to create complicated code plugs, register or send a copy of your license anywhere. You just have to program the channel in exactly the same way as you would an FM radio. Key up and speak. You set the frequencies, mode, and any repeater shift, and that's it. The mic gain and everything else feels instantly familiar. Now, the other advantage of digital voice is that it needs less bandwidth. Fusion radios fit quite happily in a 12.5 kilohertz spacing without sacrificing audio quality. In fact, they can send both voice and data within that spacing. The two main digital voice options are DN and VW. So let's have a look at that for a moment. DN is the normal mode used. Now, this stands for digital narrow, and within this bandwidth, you can transmit both voice and data. This might be a text message or a picture taken with the Yaesu picture microphone. Don't expect anything special, but it's possible. And in practice, the vast majority of people use this simply for voice. DN has great error correction. It makes it very useful for mobile use where artifacts can creep in. VW is voice wide. Now, this uses the whole bandwidth for voice. So it results in a more dynamic range for the audio, but VW doesn't have the same error correction as DN, and for mobile use, this limits the range a little because packets can be dropped. So to summarize, voice wide mode provides greater audio fidelity, but digital narrow provides greater error recovery. Again, remember DN and VW both use exactly the same bandwidth. Fusion uses a 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth. DN uses 6.25 kilohertz for voice and 6.25 kilohertz for data like GPS coordinates, etc. Voice wide uses the whole of the 12.5 kilohertz to send your voice, leaving no room for data. So here it is in an image. Now you can actually see three modes here: DN, VW, and one I haven't spoken about, which is data FR. Now, FR mode is automatic in use, and it comes into play when you're sending data. So if you're going to send a picture file or a message or whatever it may be, which you can do, of course, you can send text or images, then FR mode is automatically selected. You don't ever have to worry about that. So far, all we've talked about is simplex use, but of course you can use repeaters. You can also use simplex gateways, but I'll come back to that. You would just use a repeater in exactly the same way as you would use FM. In some ways, it's even simpler. You set up the frequencies as you would for FM, set the mode to DN or VW, and that's it. There's no CTCSS to worry about. For a well-sighted repeater, you should get an increased range with DN over FM. The repeater will quite happily accept both DN and VW, even in the same QSO, but if mobile, you'll find DN is a better option unless you're very strong with the repeater. Another mistake people make is thinking they have to connect to something in order to use it. You don't. You just use it by keying up and talking in exactly the same way you would for FM. There's no difference between FM and C4 FM as far as that's concerned. Now, you may have noticed that so far I haven't mentioned a thing about computers. This is another thing that people think digital voice is all about: computers. For normal use, you don't need them. The only difference is that the transmitted signal is digital. It's encoded in the transmitting radio and decoded in the receiving radio. And note, it's encoded, not encrypted, for those of us who are old enough to remember that clause in BR68. So why would we use a computer? Well, the main reason for a computer is to run the Yaesu Wires-X software. A Wires-X is an acronym, and it's Yaesu's internet connectivity software. So let's have a look at what benefit we get from that. Traditionally, repeaters have been sited on commercial masts in prime locations that give excellent coverage. Quite often, these were at preferential rates or even free. Now, while this is still the case for some repeaters, getting a space on a commercial mast is now really expensive, assuming you can get one at all. And this has meant that repeaters are quite often sited at less than optimal locations, or even at people's own houses. The downside of this is that the effective range of the repeater is much smaller. However, if we have several repeaters around the area, we can use a computer on each of the repeaters, link them over the internet via Wires-X, and then we create a network of repeaters that covers that area. This is what we do with Northwest Fusion Group, for example. All right, they're all on different frequencies, but it's only a click on the dial. If you've got them in the memories, as you go out of range of one, click on the dial, you're into the next one. The main thing is that the network would cover the whole area previously covered by the single repeater up on the top of the hill. And that's truly useful. There are, however, only so many repeater frequencies to go round. So another option is to use a simplex gateway. Now, the difference with a gateway is that it only has one frequency. It's basically a radio, just like the one you would normally use on FM connected to wires X. Gateways generally have a much lower power allocation than repeaters. Now, I'm talking now, not after the end of February, but that's a whole other subject. A simplex gateway operates between the internet and RF. It has its own idiosyncrasies, but it's cheap to set up and it can fill gaps in the network. Also, unlike a repeater, the NOV can also be held by an intermediate licensee. Again, that is probably going to change come the end of February. If you're not in range of a repeater or gateway, or maybe live in sheltered or assisted housing, you can still use the WiseX software with a compatible radio to connect into a network, generating no RF, allowing you to continue your hobby. It's important to understand the difference between digital voice modes and internet linking. One can benefit the other, but they're two completely separate things. And internet linking, of course, can be used by both analog and digital systems equally. Think of Echolink and IRLP. So in summary, the only difference between C4 FM and FM is the way the audio information is propagated between the transmitter and the receiver. In all other ways, it feels exactly the same. You get the benefit of better range. And in addition, we have the benefits of using the technology to widen the catchment area of the network. We don't have to or need to do this, but it can be useful to do so. And for amateurs who don't have access to an aerial anymore, it allows them to continue speaking to their friends and enjoying their hobby. So there's a simple introduction to digital voice. And I'm sure that you will have some questions along the way. So I'm very happy to accept any questions that you have. Where have we go? So we'll go back to that. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. Don't forget to unmute.
Yes. Otherwise, you'll be talking to yourself.
Don't all shout at once.
Any questions, anybody? Oh, good evening, Alan. Got young Alan there, Alan. Yeah. Yeah, nobody got any questions? Does anybody use digital radio?
And accessible.
Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What-
it's not a question, but I found that really informative, Ian. It's kind of it's the introduction that I wish people would provide for digital voice. You should write a book or something.
I've got enough making videos and doing these and one thing or another, you know. There's only so many hours in the day. I'm retired now. There are only now 2 hours in every day.
That's when you have your breakfast.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could always write a pamphlet instead of a book.
Yeah. No, there are digital voice seems to phase everybody, and I fully understand that because the vast majority of people get introduced to DMR first.
5%.
And DMR is the most frightening of all of them. I struggle setting up DMR. I still don't understand the whole thing about it. You know what I mean? There are so many different terminology things. The actual terminology they use within DMR is completely different to what we're used to using because it's a commercial product, DMR. Whereas Fusion C4FM is an absolute doddle because you don't have to connect to anything. You can use it simplex. You can with DMR, in fairness. You can use it on a repeater. You can program it from the front of the radio, just the same as you would with an FM repeater. You can program it exactly the same way. And then you just key the microphone and talk. And it really is as simple as that. And what you'll get is a really clear audio. Now, I'm an FM guy. I like FM. I still like FM. I still prefer it to C4FM. But that's just me. Linda, my Linda, prefers C4FM. So each to their own, you know. But at the end of the day, it's still radio. You're still squirting RF up to an aerial and using it as that. It's not the it's not real radio thing, because actually it really is. Northwest Fusion Group began as a simplex net.
Yeah, Ian, have you got to have a certain radio to do this on, or could I do it on my FT857D?
No, you have to have a Yaesu radio, a modern Yaesu radio.
Right.
Just all, I think, all of the VHF, UHF Yaesu radios now include C4FM. The 991A has C4FM as well. And that's a shack in a box, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have the FT710. So I'll is the material available to get more into it other than just the manual?
The 710, or do you mean the 70?
I don't think I have. The FT710.
The HF radio.
HF, yeah.
That doesn't do VHF, does it?
No.
No. So you can't use C4FM with that because it's not designed for it.
Right. That's okay.
Okay. You can do C4FM on HF, but only with the 991A.
Thank you.
Yes, Stephen is our latest club member. He only passed his foundation on Saturday.
Congratulations.
He's just waiting for his call sign coming.
Congratulations.
Well done, Stephen.
Alan, you had something.
I was just going to say, could you just comment on the overlap between All Star and the Wires X?
Yes, I will. We're getting dangerously close to the end of this meeting, so
we are. I'm watching that. Yeah.
Yeah.
6
if we get to the end of the meeting, I've only got one, so I don't know whether I can use the same credentials. If we drop out, can I use the same credentials to come in again?
No.
I did send a second meeting, but I think we'll probably be all right.
Yeah, we've got
Okay.
6 minutes according to this.
Yeah.
According to mine.
Okay. Right. The difference with All Star. All Star is FM. Okay, so you can use any FM transceiver, and then it's internet linked. It actually uses a piece of software. The base software underneath it is called. You got to love getting old, haven't you? It's called Asterisk, which is actually it's PBX software. So it's telephony software with extensions and lines and all that kind of thing, and it runs on a Raspberry Pi usually. And I run an All Star repeater here as well as the C4FM repeater, and I love All Star. It's great, and as I say, you can use any FM transceiver that has VHF or UHF, that can access the repeater or gateway that you want to do. So you don't need anything special for that, but you will need CTCSS set up in the same way you would for any analog repeater. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not digital voice, but it is digitally connected across the internet. Again, it doesn't have to be. My All Star repeater just works as a normal repeater, a normal FM repeater, but it is then linked to provide a greater coverage of the area.
Anybody else? Any more questions? No. I've got a question for Alan, RFS. It's nothing to do with the digital radio. Have you managed to get your radio sorted?
No, I haven't, Linda, not yet. I phoned that chap you recommended.
Yeah.
Last Friday.
Right.
But unfortunately, he'd left for the day. I phoned at around about 3 o'clock, and he'd gone. Now,
Ah,
I said I'd phone him on Monday, but this week I've actually on Monday and Tuesday been to 2 funerals, so I've not
Oh,
had any
dear.
time
Oh,
to
dear.
do anything really. So
Right.
so I'm
As long as
still
it's in
actually
hand.
trying to mend it myself. I've not quite given up yet, you know.
Right.
So you know, but yeah, the earliest I can phone him is on Thursday because I'm out all day tomorrow as well.
I see.
So-
Well, Martin's getting very. He's not smiling as much now as he used to do.
Is he not? Oh, Martin, come on now.
Yeah, because we've had Chris on as well in the morning. G0VGS, and we've had some interesting conversations.
can I just ask if anybody, Alan, you said you'd used it. Has anybody else had a go at digital voice of any style, DMR or whatever, or D-Star?
I have.
Hello, Keith.
Yeah, it uses.
But not always successful.
What did you use, Keith? Was it?
I use DMR.
Okay.
With
Right.
an MD8380 on a little Pi interface.
Yeah. Yeah, it's DMR is excellent. It has some really good features. I don't think the audio's is quite as good as Fusion, in my opinion. Other opinions are available. In my opinion, the audio quality of Fusion beats the lot. D-Star is probably the worst, just because it's the oldest. You know, they've never really done much with updating the codec or anything, and it does lose a bit. DMR again can be very good. The problem with DMR is there's a huge difference between people setting up their radios, and some can sound exceptional and some are very poor. And certain radios sound better than others. Personally, I like the little Motorola radios. They're made for the job. They're commercial radios, and they're very good. But they tend to be single band. So, you know, nobody wants a single band radio that only does the bit they want anymore. Everybody wants a wide banded, multi-band radio that's absolute rubbish. But there you go. Such is life. Jim, you said you hadn't tried it. Is it just because you haven't fancied it, or you don't have a radio for it?
Yeah, and it's mostly because I don't have the radio for it. Knowing that I could look up a repeater frequency, set my radio to that, I could try that, couldn't I? I simply haven't, because I've thought it was a bit beyond my radio.
Okay, what radio do you have?
It's a 879.
I'm sorry, I missed that. There's quite a bit of noise coming from the club, so
No, I got
it's
that.
sometimes
No,
beating you.
The 897. The
Alan, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, we're going to get binned in a minute, so you better hurry up.
Yeah, you've got 1 minute left.
Okay, I'm showing 37 minutes. That says 3, but never mind. Go on, Jim. What was your radio again?
It was the 897.
Okay, again, is the 897 a shack in a box, or?
Yeah, no, it's just the, I got the HF and the FM.
Right.
2 meters. I think if I just checked up on the repeater frequency,
yeah,
and then tried it, simple as that.
Yeah, I'm sure these guys, if you've got FM,
something.
you should be able to use All Star. I don't know whether you'd be able to reach RO at Haslingden. You may be able
Possibly,
to reach that.
Yeah.